북한자유연합 고문인 로렌스 팩 박사는 미국 내 친북 세력들이라는 주제의 시국 강연을 통해서 미국에서 반한 활동과 함께 현 윤석열 대통령의 퇴진을 벌이는 한인사회 내 종북 좌파 집단의 활동을 파헤쳤다. 지난 5월 11일 윌셔 크리스찬 교회에서 가진 시국 강연에서 로렌스 팩 박사는 특히 윤석열 대통령의 미국 방문 중 지난 4월 26일 한미 정상회담이 열리는 워싱턴 DC에서 이들 종북 좌파 집단의 시위 영상과 함께 주모자급 인물과 활동에 대한 목적 등을 상세히 분석했다. 로렌스 팩 박사는 이들이 미국에서 벌이고 있는 활동은 분명히 북한에 동조하며 반한과 함께 반미 활동도 숨겨져 있는 것이지만 그들 자신의 안위를 위해서 자유국가인 미국에서 이와 같은 활동을 하는 것은 비겁한 행위이며 그 행동이 구체적으로 미국을 해치는 수준에 이른다면 법적으로 처벌 대상이 될 수 있음을 아울러 시사하기도 했다. 이날 주제 강연의 내용이다.
I've been introduced to you already, so I just wanted to briefly describe to you, although you may already know, about the pro-North Korean movement in the U.S. Today.
저는 잠깐 여러분이 저를 좀 알겠지만 잠깐 저에 대해서 소개를 하겠습니다. 저는 인트로덕션에 보면 북한자유연합 고문 그리고 아쿠스를 지지하는 사람입니다.
In the U.S., I classify the pro-North Korean 정북 or 친북 groups into different categories.
정북을 여러 가지로 나누어지고 있고요. 그 나누어진 것에 대해서 여러분과 나누기 원합니다.
I specify the openly hardcore 꼴통 정북 or 친북 groups is one group.
저는 친북 단체에 굉장히 꼴통같이 그런 데 일을 하고 있고요. 네.
Then there are the pro-North, in English we call them front groups. In Korean I believe the word is 위장단체, the 가자 두 얼굴, 가자 탈 단체, front groups.
네, 뭐 들으셨으니까 그렇게 설명하겠습니다.
And then the third type of groups are people who may not be openly pro-North Korea, but they're allies of, they cooperate with, they're friendly with the pro-North Korean groups. They enable them.
그러니까 알라이로 같이 있는 분들이 있고요. 오픈돼서 있는 사람도 있지만 또 자기는 나름대로 여러 가지의 사명들이 있다고 봅니다.
Now I'd like to mention some of their main activities these days. As you know, that they hold demonstrations and rallies here in Los Angeles. You've seen some of those probably. Some of you have been involved in counter demonstrations against them.
친북 단체에 대해서 지금 일어나는 일들을 잠깐 여러분과 소개하기로 합니다.
However, recently they've been intensively lobbying the U.S. Congress, not only pro-North groups but leftist groups in the Korean American community, also non-Korean Americans, lobbying intensively Congress for demands made by North Korea.
여러분도 알다시피 몇 년 동안 지금 미국의 그 활동가들이 일을 하고 있고요. 평화 조약에 대한 그 북한의 요구를 지지하는 그런 집단 로비를 하고 있음을 여러분 알고 있지 않습니까?
And the main demand they're focusing on from North Korea is the demand for a peace treaty between the U.S. and the North, but a no preconditions peace treaty. A no preconditions peace treaty between the U.S. and North Korea is their main focus of their lobbying these days.
지금 여러분이 그들이 하고 있는 것은 말은 그렇지만 또 그렇지 않은 것을 여러분은 알고 있습니다.
With that information, I'd like to focus on some left-wing individuals who have been involved with, collaborating with some of the pro-North forces. The individuals who I'll be highlighting may be classified as leftist individuals, but as you'll see from my presentation, they cooperate with pro-North forces.
여러분과 슬라이드를 볼 예정입니다. 그들이 지금 하고 있는 그 집중적인 로비가 무엇이고 또 그들이 하고 있는 그런 것들을 이 시간에 고발하고자 합니다.
We'll go back to the first slide of the press conference in Washington, back a little further. Here we go. This was 3.1 of this year, and you see Congressman Brad Sherman reintroducing his bill, 한반도 평화 법안.
여러분이 알다시피 이번에 그 여기 있던 슬라이드를 보면 그 캐포로 히어로에서 캐팩 지지자들이 나왔던 사건입니다.
And you can see Congressman Sherman there at the podium.
저기에 컨그레스맨이 있고요, 포디오에.
And then next to him, you can see the leader of the lobbying group KPAC, which is the 민주 참여 Forum, Korean American Public Action Committee.
K-팩에 있는 사람들이 바로 옆에 있고요. 그분들이 또 같이 이번에 했던 것입니다.
That gentleman's name, one of the founders and main individuals behind KPAC is Mr. Che Kwang-chul, Casey Che.
그리고 그 사람의 이름은 최강철이고요.
And he's become very close with Sherman and a number of other members of the Democratic Party who are co-sponsoring this very bad bill.
셜맨이라는 사람과 굉장히 친분을 갖고 있는 분입니다.
There's also someone else in the picture I'd like to point out. This young lady with the yellow kerchief, the yellow banner there, she is a representative of the pro-North Korean front group Women Cross DMZ.
그리고 그 옆에 있는 옐로우 그 타이틀을 갖고 있는 분은 DMZ 여자 활동가죠.
And as you may know from media reports or my own information, Women Cross DMZ has a leader by the name of Christine An, a pro-North Korean activist who for many years, Christine An, has been in communication with and collaborating with North Korean intelligence agents from the 통일천선부 at the 북한유엔 대표부 in New York City.
굉장히 많은 북한과의 관계를 갖고 있는 분이고요. 그다음에 women's 파워라고 하지만 북한과의 많은 관계 속에서 많은 일을 하고 있습니다.
So Congressman Sherman and Mr. Che, having this representative of Women Cross DMZ there, are either ignorant of or they don't care about the fact that represented there is a group which at the leadership level has been in contact with, collaborating with North Korean 공작원 간첩들.
북한과 많은 관계를 갖고 있으면서 그들이 많은 일을 하고 있습니다.
We can go to the next slide. Here is a rally against President Yoon's recent visit to the U.S. This was April 26, as you can see outside the White House.
이번에 그 한국 대통령 왔을 때 그들이 불태심했던 것입니다.
And the slogans they were yelling, if you watch the video, you can see some of the slogans, but they were yelling, "Puppet traitor, Yoon Suk-yeol, puppet traitor." Puppet traitor sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Those are words that you see in 노동 신문, and those are words that you hear when you listen to the 평양 방송. Puppet traitor.
파펫 트레이라는 것은 여러분 알다시피 인형 같은 이렇게 뭐 파펫하는 이런 식으로 윤석열은 그런 사람이다, 그런 대통령이다라고 그들이 하고 있습니다.
You can also see here the main banner, the large white banner.
보시면
At the very bottom it says Korean American Public Action Committee, KPAC, 민주 참여 Forum.
그 K-팩에서 자기네들이 했다고 로고로 이름을 써 있었습니다.
By the way, I should note that Mr. Che Kwang-chul of KPAC, in a radio interview after this occurred, said he had nothing to do with it, KPAC had nothing to do with it, so you can judge for yourself whether KPAC was involved and members of KPAC, supporters of KPAC were involved. I'll leave that to your judgment versus his denial.
저렇게 하고 나서 나중에 라디오 인터뷰가 있었는데 자기 K-팩들은 상관이 없는 거다, 이 부분과 상관없다, 뭐 이렇게 얘기를 했는데 말이 되지 않는다라고 생각합니다.
We can go to the next slide, please. This is a screenshot of the Koltong Jongbuk website in the U.S. of Jaemidong Pocheongguk Yonapwe, which is directly connected with the North Korean government. Their leaders are loyal to the North Korean government. They have close relationships with the North Korean agents based at the United Nations.
저는 보이지 않아, 뭐라 하지 하나 안 보이네요.
Jaemidong Pocheongguk Yonapwe.
재미동포 전국연합회에서 자기네들이 규정했던 글입니다.
And this was a report on the rallies against President Yoon, and you can see here they mentioned the participation of Korean American Public Action, in addition to other leftist and pro-North Korean groups. They specified Mr. Che's organization as participating in the anti-Yoon protests.
네, 이번에 그 인도선이 왔을 때 그들을 내가 participate 그 사건의 그 글이고요. 제가 죄송하지만 글이 안 보여서 뭐라 설명 못하겠습니다.
We can go to the next slide. This is a screenshot of a Sunjun website, propaganda website from North Korea. Arirang Meari focused on overseas Koreans and anyone who can manage to view it within South Korea. 마리랑 메아리.
저는 KPEC 미아리라는 데서 1369년 북한 선전 웹사이트고요. 미국에서 여러 동료 단체의 로비 활동을 쓴 글입니다.
And you can in this I don't know if you can see it clearly, but in this article from the North Korean propaganda website, they make favorable mention of the KPAC group. The Minju Chamyo Forum, they mention it by name, and they also mention the bill, the Hanbando Pyeonghwa Poban. They're mentioning this favorably, these organization and the bill.
그 뒤에는 여러분들 알다시피 홍보 사이트에는 그 KPEC의 백그라운드 그들이 여기서 하고 있는 것을 알려주고 있습니다.
Now, I do not classify KPAC or Mr. Che as pro-North Korea. I classify them as pro-대한민국 민주당 and pro-Moon Jae-in 정권. But nevertheless, as I'll show you in upcoming slides, they have been unfortunately collaborating with, making a joint effort with some 종북 groups.
종북 그룹의 민주당이나 그다음에 누구 대통령 그분에 대해서 그들과 같이 일하는 단체라고 저는 생각을 하고 있고요.
We can go to the next slide. And here's one example of what I just referred to. This is about a pro-North lobbying push, a pro-North lobbying campaign, which will take place in Washington, D.C. on July 27th, the date of the signing of the armistice ending the Korean War. This year, July 27th, a big event in D.C.
KPEC 공동후원회 DC에서 미국 내 여러 종북 단체의 로비 캠페인의 그 사인들입니다.
And you can see at the top the logo of KPAC, the Minju Chamyo Forum.
위에 있는 것이 KPEC의 사인이고요.
With the Taeyang logo up there. There are, however, not only left-wing groups involved in this, but there are some hardcore 뻘동, 친북 and 종북 groups also involved, co-sponsoring with KPAC, joining together with KPAC.
같이 연합해서 KPEC과 같이 일하는 꼴통 단체들이 이렇게 같이 있습니다.
There's Women Cross DMZ,
아까 얘기했던 Women Cross DMZ도 있고요.
Veterans for Peace.
그다음 Veterans 있고요.
Korea Peace Now is the lobbying department, the lobbying branch of Women Across DMZ.
평화를 주장하는 그런 라비 단체도 있고요.
And down here you see some of the really hardcore pro-North Korean groups. You can see, for example, the Yugido Shuchon is there, listed there, June 15th U.S. Committee. Yugido Shuchon Miwonbe.
거기 의원에도 거기 같이 있고요.
And you can see the 제미동포 전국연합회.
재미 전북 연합회도 있고요.
And at the very bottom, you can see Nodutol, the Korean American Jongbuk Youth Group. Nodutol.
노르돌?
Yeah, Nodutol, a New York-based group of
뉴욕에서 베이스를 하고
young Korean Americans
젊은 청소년들입니다.
who are fanatically supporting North Korea.
북한을 추궁하는 그런 어린 단체들입니다.
And for some reason, KPAC has decided to join with these groups in their lobbying effort to push and to support HR 1369 Sherman's bill.
그들과 같이 그렇게 연합해서 그런 일을 하고 있고 있습니다.
We can go to the next slide.
다음 슬라이드 가겠습니다.
Now, this is a slide from an organization which is primarily based in Korea, although they call themselves an international group.
이번은 이것들은 한국 평화 호수 단체라고 얘기를 하죠. 합의해서 그런 단체를 하고 있습니다.
It's a left-wing group known as Korea Peace Appeal.
한국 평화 이런 주간이라고 얘기합니다.
And they engage in signature campaigns, for example, in support of the peace agreement and against U.S. 대한민국 joint military exercises.
반대적인 개념을 가지고 사인을 받는 그런 그룹들이라고 얘기하고 있습니다.
And you can see here, among the endorsers listed of their statement, there's a statement they published on their website. I'll show you the statement in a minute. And in the endorsers, you see a number of left-wing and the Chimbuk and Jongbuk groups, and one of them you can see here is KPAC. The 1, 2, 3, 4th. The fourth name is KPAC.
네
Mr. Choi
번째
Kwang-cheol's group.
KPEC 있고요. 그게 최강철의 그 그룹이고요.
And you can see Nodutol is there.
노릇돌도 있고요. 젊은이들.
And 제리동포 전국연합회.
연합회도 있고요. 위에.
And a number of other pro-North front groups openly pro-North groups, leftist groups.
그리고 북한을 주장하는 그런 그룹들이 많이 같이 하고 있습니다.
So these were the signatories. These are the groups which signed on to a statement. What is the statement? Let's go to the next slide. They signed on to this statement, the organization names you just saw. Stop ROK US combined military exercises. No more joint training, joint exercises between US military and South Korean military.
한국과 미국의 연합 활동, 연합적인 군사 활동을 하지 말자 뭐 이런 얘기를 하고 있습니다.
A very radical, far left position. I can't believe that the ordinary members who go to the fancy KPAC meetings with Mr. Che in LA, I can't believe that they support this kind of radical position. They must not be aware of it. They must not know that this is the position of their leaders in KPAC.
KPAC이 여러 가지 일들을 하고 있고 또 어떻게 이런 일을 할 수 있을까 뭐 자기는 생각 안 되는데 많은 사람들이 동원되고 있습니다.
And we can go to the next slide, please. Now I'll shift gears a little bit to another local left-wing activist. This is a young lady who you can often see in the protests every week in front of the Korean Consulate General here in Los Angeles, and over the years at many other protests. Her name is Linda Lee.
그러면 LA 공산단체 친북 시위 참여자 린다 리라는 사람입니다. 린다 리.
Yes, Linda Lee. And this was a protest actually in 2013. And this was a protest organized by hardcore pro-North Korean and U.S. communist groups. Non-Korean Americans who were members of various communist parties, Marxist-Leninist parties, organized this rally. And you can see Miss Lee at the rally there.
저게 2014년에 찍은 사진이고요. 그때 같이 다른 종북들과 연합해서 시위를 했던 사건입니다.
And she's holding a sign from the communist group. You can see there iacla.org. That is a front group name. That group is the same office, the same leaders, the same members as the Workers' World Party. It's a small American communist group. And she's holding there, displaying the sign of this communist group.
사인에 들고 있는 것이 그 사인 그들이 하고 있는 단체의 이름이고요. 그들과 같이 연합하고 있는 그런 단체의 이름들이라고 얘기를 하고 있습니다.
No more U.S. war threats against Korea.
미국이 이제 더 이상 그런 트레이트하지 말라고.
You can see the gentleman wearing the 목사 collar there, right next to standing with her.
pastor 칼라하고 있는 분이요.
That is Mr. Baek Seung-bae,
백승배
a local Jongbuk Insa, who was for many years the leader of the LA branch of Pominyon, the 이적 단체 Pominyon.
저분이 그 호민연이라는 단체에서 이끌었던 목사님인 것 같습니다. 목사님입니다.
And here is another 목사 who was Unitarian, Mr. Kim Hyun-hwan.
김현환 감리교 목사.
He is the leader of the 재미동포 전국연합회, the crazy, the 꼴동 전국단체.
재미동포 맞던
Mr. Kim Dong-moo, Kim Dong-ji, is a specialist, an expert, Kim Hyun-wan, in the Juche idea, in Juche Sasang. He believes in the Juche Sasang. That's his religion, and he believes in it, and that's that gentleman there standing.
주체 사상을 강조했던 분이고요. 또 그것 때문에 일을 많이 했었은 분이에요.
And I actually was at this event. Some of you might have been there, and we were counter-protesting against this event. We were doing a bande shiwi against these Jongbuk groups and American communist groups on that date.
그날 우리가 또 종북 그 할 때 우리 반대쪽에서 그들과 또 같이 프로테스트 했습니다.
And the American communists who were there, you can't see in this picture, but if you make a wider picture or the video, you can see the leaders of the American communist groups. They were chanting, they were yelling, "We love Kim Jong-un, we love Kim Jong-un" in English because they didn't speak Korean.
그래도 그들이 그때도 또 북쪽 그러니까 미국에 사는 사람 그 외국 사람들이 자기는 김정은을 사랑한다 뭐 이런 것도 그날 같이 하고 했습니다.
And we can go to the next slide, please. Here's another picture of Miss Lee. This was in Washington, D.C., and this was an anti-THAAD protest against the terminal high-altitude missile defense system in place in the Songju in Gyeongbuk in Korea. And you can see the yellow signs, no THAAD in Korea, sign a peace treaty. And right up here in front, very prominently, is Miss Linda Lee at that rally in Washington.
저것도 친북 상태에 대한 그분이 참석했던 단체고요. 그다음에 그 사드 반대 뭐 시위 등 했던 그런 사인인 것 같습니다.
Those trademark, those famous black and yellow signs that all the members are holding, that's from another American communist group. I mentioned earlier the Workers' World Party. You know, in the world of communism, they always split off and form new groups and divide and form new different communist groups from the original ones.
많은 종북단체들이 모임을 통해서 이런 시위를 했고요. 또 그 사인에 있듯이 뭐 여러 가지 제가 보여질 않아서
The yellow signs are from another communist group called Party for Socialism and Liberation.
파란 사인들은 또 다른 단체에서 하고 있는
It's kind of a stepchild, a breakaway group from the Workers' World Party.
같이지만 같이 일하지 않 같이 하면서도 또 다른 단체.
So now we see that's the second example I've shown you of Miss Lee at an event being sponsored by, being participated in by not only Jongbuk groups but American non-Korean communists.
그 카미네스 그룹 종북 단체들의 모든 일들이고요.
And I just wanted to let you know, in case we all laugh when we hear of American communist parties, you know, how ineffective and basically irrelevant they are in our country, thank goodness. But I wanted to point out that there is something rather disturbing about these groups that Ms. Lee has been collaborating with, whose protest she's been going to. Something very disturbing about these American communist groups.
네, 너무 말을 많이 해서 제가 도저히 따라하지 못하겠습니다. Anyway, 이 카미네스 단체가 많은 일들을 하고 있고요. 중요한 것은 여러 단체들이 이런 일들을 하고 있음을 우리가 기억해야 한다는 것을 저는 얘기를 해드리고 싶습니다.
You all know that the Jongbuk, Chimbuk people within the Korean American community within Hanin Sahae are often, or at least until 2017, until the travel ban, they were often going to North Korea. Yoon Gil-sang of Jae-mi-dong-ho Cheongguk-yeonhap-hue and Rogil-nam, Tongji of Rogil-nam of the late Rogil-nam of Minjok Tongshin, and the people from Nodutol, the young Korean American kids in New York, they were frequently visiting North Korea. You know that.
많은 단체들이 북한을 방문하는 있는 거 좀 아시죠? 다 한국말 하셔서 뭐 거기는 트랜슬레이션이 필요 없을 것 같습니다.
But you may not know that the American communists also from time to time visit North Korea, the non-Korean members of various American communist parties, such as the ones who organized these rally photos I showed you. They also visited Pyongyang prior to the travel ban.
많은 친북 단체들이 북한을 방문하고 있는 걸 여러분 아시기 바랍니다.
One of the leaders, who used to be the leader, you may remember the previous slide, the Workers' World Party rally in LA 2013, and this one in 2016, Party for Socialism and Liberation. The leader of both groups, because he left the old group and started the new group, the leader was a man named Brian Becker, an American communist.
예, 그리고 2014년 슬라이드 보셨고 2016년도 봤지만 또 다른 단체들 통해서 지금 여러 일들을 지금 계속적으로 하고 있습니다.
And Brian Becker visited North Korea in a few times. One time was in the year 2000. He visited North Korea in 2000, and he met with a North Korean official, high-ranking North Korean official named Kim Jung-rin.
브라이언 베커라는 사람이 북한을 가서 김준 그분을 만났다고
Kim Jung-rin.
저도 그분은 누군지 모르니까.
Who's Kim Jung-rin? Well, he's a member of the Chosun Nodongdang Junganghae, the Central Committee of the North Korean Workers' Party. But he's also something else. He was the individual in the North Korean government, in the party, who was in charge of the Taenam Hwalpong, terrorism, propaganda, sabotage. This person, Kim Jung-rin, was in charge of all of the anti-Daehanminguk terrorism and other subversive actions, especially during the 1980s and into the 1990s.
모든 사건들에 일어나는 것들을 북한에서 그 대한민국을 하는 그런 나쁜 저거들을 하셨던 하는 단체 기관이라고 얘기합니다.
It's believed that this fellow Kim Jung-rin was very close with Kim Jong-il at that time, the leader, and he helped organize, for example, the Aung San bombing in 1983, the Aung San Burma bombing, as one of the terrorist actions which this Mr. Kim had been responsible for organizing on behalf of the North Korean leadership.
예, 밤 사건과 버마 사건 모든 것을 했던.
So you can see that there are links between the American communists who organized the two rallies of the photos I just showed you, which Miss Lee was attending, the people who organized it, the people who had the slogans and the placards and the signs. There's a link between them and some really dangerous individuals within North Korea.
친북 단체들의 활동이 그들이 굉장히 조직적이고요. 또 그들이 최강철 그룹이나 뭐 이런 그룹 통해서 많은 활동을 하고 있습니다.
Now let's go to the next slide. Here is another event, but this was not an event defending North Korea or attacking the Republic of Korea. This was in Westwood in 2014. This was a pro-Hamas, anti-Israel 시위.
이게 2014년 공산 단체와 LA에서 열린 반 이스라엘 시위죠. 네.
The members there were from, most of the members, of course, were from Middle Eastern organizations which supported Hamas, members of various Arab American groups and Palestinian American groups who supported Hamas, who supported various terrorist organizations. And here again we see Linda Lee. You can see there she's in the blue shirt on the end there. There's Linda Lee. And let the children live, peace.
네, 거기에 그 여러분도 알다시피 린다 리가 또 있고요. 그다음에 그들 단체의 그 공산 단체가 LA에서 그 시위 단체가 열렸던 그런 사건.
Now, with the pro-Hamas groups which organized this rally in 2014, it was jointly sponsored by the American communist groups. Again, one of the sponsors was a Party for Socialism and Liberation, the American Marx-Lenin주의자 단체.
모르겠습니다.
And you can see two non-Koreans there, the gentleman in the white shirt and the gentleman in the red cap. They're leaders of the American communists here in LA, Party of Socialism and Liberation. The man in the red cap is Preston Wood. He's here in LA and he often goes to the Jongbuk events. He went to a Minjok Tongshin event of Rogil-nam, and Rogil-nam gave him a big present and thanked him for supporting the Jongbuk movement in LA.
네, 뭐 여러분이 알아서 언더스탠드 해야 되는데 종북 그 하는 그 빨간 모자 쓴 사람 그런 분들이나 왜냐면 제가 여기에 대해서 다 모르니까 이거를 제가 통역하기에는 정말 impossible입니다. 진짜 이거 주셔야 된다는 분명히 얘기했는데.
In the red shirt, Israel guilty of killing, Israel guilty. In the red shirt, that's 이용식, a local 친북 운동가.
운동가고요. Israel guilty of the killing. 죽인 이스라엘 사람들이 죽인 그들이.
In the red shirt, 이용식. He used to work for Rogil-nam as a member of Minjok Tongshin, and then he established some other groups he was involved in. Just recently, they held the second anniversary tribute to Rogil-nam. Minjok Tongshin had a big event, and he was one of the leaders, the organizers of that event to pay tribute to the Goltong Jongbuk인 Rogil-nam. He was close with Rogil-nam.
종북 일을 했던 분이고요. 너무 많아서 제가 도저히 할 수가 없겠네요.
And here's another.
스탑 해야 되는데 스탑도 안 하지 계속 하니까.
Another local 친북인사. This gentleman in the blue cap and this shirt. This is 하용진. He was one of the leaders of 포민연, LA 포민연 남가주 본부. Of course, 포민연 is a Jongbuk group, 이적 단체. So there weren't too many Korean Americans there. They just invited. It was mostly pro-Hamas and the communists, but they invited a few. Like Linda, leftists, and a few pro-North Korean activist comrades to participate.
그 정도는 다 언더스탠드 것 같습니다.
We can go to the next slide. Here's a picture of, you can see Miss Lee there with the cell phone. This is at the Pyeonghwa Kyohwae, the Chimbuk Kyohwae in Los Angeles. As you may know, Kim Gi-dae Moksa, who often has events of pro-North Korean organizations at his church. And you can see
LA에 있는 한국교 평화교회라는 교회입니다.
this event was a tribute event, kind of a thank you event for Shin Eun-mi. And you see in the red there is Shin Eun-mi.
여기에서 신은미라가 추모하는 그런 슬라이드고요.
You know Shin Eun-mi, she's the one who said there's freedom of religion, freedom of worship in North Korea. She is the one.
신앙의 자유가 있다. 뭐 이렇게 얘기하시는 분이죠.
She is the lady who, at the famous, at the annual North Korean holiday for the birthday of the dictator Kim Il-sung, Taeyangchol, they have a large singing event where communists from various countries and pro-North Korean activists go and sing. And she went to that event and she would sing a song in praise of North Korea. 태양철,
태양절에 뭐 노래도 하고.
북한 행사.
네.
노래 불렸어요. And here is a leader of another pro-North Korean group. You can't see her face, but this is Chung Yeon-jin of the Action One Korea.
정영진이라는 액션 원의 그 창시자입니다.
She is now going back and forth between LA and Seoul. She's holding a lot of protests in front of the U.S. Embassy. She's engaged in a lot of hate America, hate America meetings and hate America speeches in Seoul, especially in front of the U.S. Embassy and at various 친보 or 친북단체 in Seoul.
서울에서 미국의 그들을 뭐 욕하고 뭐 이런 분들이랍니다.
She has a big plan, Chung Young-jin and her Action One Korea. They have a big plan for July 27th. They're gathering a lot of women and they're going to try to surround the American Army base at Pyeongtaek. They're going to make a human chain around the Pyeongtaek base so that no one can go in or out. That's Chung Young-jin's project for July 27th this year.
줄라이 27에 평택에 가서 군부대 앞에서 여자들과 바리케이트를 하고 이런 거를 하려고 준비를 한다고 합니다.
And the next slide, please. This is a screenshot from Minjok Tongshin, Rogunam's Goltong Jongbuk site. And this was an article which was posted from another Chimbo site in South Korea, and it was reposted on Minjok Tongshin about Linda Lee.
저 웹사이트에 민족통신이라는 웹사이트에 나오는 린다리입니다.
And this article was about the lawsuit which Linda Lee successfully brought, which she won against some South Korean conservatives who accused her and the group Missy USA, which she was very active with, of being supporters of the North and of being pro-North. And she won the lawsuit in Korea against these 한국 보수 단체 and 한국 보수 매체.
한국에서 고소를 해갖고 고소해서 이긴 사건을 가지고 얘기를 한 거예요.
So this article was congratulating her and praising her.
축하한다고, 축복한다고.
You proved that 정북 멀리, we have to fight against 정북 멀리. And
당신이 이겼다고 바로바로 해야 되겠습니다. 그래야 제가 언더스탠드 될 것 같습니다.
And that was the situation with
시작한
that.
것은
I'd like to also point out with regard
또 얘기하고 싶은 것은
to this slide.
이 슬라이드에서
After this, she gave an interview with many Chimbo Meche in Seoul, and they congratulated her. You won the lawsuit against the Bosu Danche. Very good, fighting. And she said in one interview that the interviewer, the Chimbo Gija, asked her, what was the problem? Why were the Bosu Danche attacking you and criticizing you? And in the interview, Miss Lee said, well, the real problem goes back to the older generation of Korean American society.
Okay, go ahead.
Too fast? The real problem goes back to the older generation of Korean Americans. And the problem is their idea of anti-communism. Because of anti-communist ideology, anti-communist 반공 사상, that's why I had these problems with these people criticizing me.
반공 사상 자기를 크리티사이즈 하기 때문에 그렇게 했다 얘기를 합니다.
And what's interesting about that was recently I happened to be researching and studying some of the old speeches, some of the old works of Kim Il-sung Sonjip, which you can find online. And as I was reading through some of these old Kim Il-sung speeches, Kim Il-sung Sonjip, I came across a speech that Kim Il-sung gave in 1961.
1961년에.
And in 1961, Kim Il-sung said something very similar to what Miss Lee said. He said the problem in the Korean community is this old-fashioned, outdated idea of anti-communism. And he said, again, it has a long history of the older people in Korea, just as Miss Lee said. It comes down from the older people, this dangerous idea of anti-communism. So I just thought it was interesting how her ideas reflected those expressed by Kim Il-sung. We can go to the next slide, please. This is the final slide I'll be presenting.
마지막 슬라이드입니다.
This was an event by a visiting left-wing professor from Korea. I believe he was at Cheongbuk 대학교, or what was it? Wonkwang 대학교. Is it in Cheongbuk, if I remember correctly? And he is a visiting professor there.
거기에 방문했을 때
이재봉 교수, and he came to speak to some Chapa Chimbuk groups in Los Angeles. I believe this one was sponsored. It was at the Wonbulgyo Center in Los Angeles, and it was sponsored by the Yugilo Shucheonwiwonhwae Goltong Chimbuk 단체.
네,
And you can see here, there's Linda Lee again. And what's
린다 리 있고요. 거기
this gentleman was our old friend, the late Mr. Choi Jung-sung.
재중성의 친구고요.
Unfortunately, he passed away, but he went
지금 죽었습니다.
to hear what was going on. Of course, he was a 애국자, he was patriot, but he went to listen to what the Jongbuk people were saying.
종북 친구들이 얘기하는 것을 듣고자 갔습니다.
So the Pro-North people called the police. There's a policeman.
그래서
They wanted
경찰이 왔고요.
Mr. Che out
그리고
of our
미스터를
meeting.
나가라고 했습니다.
And you can see there Linda Lee, is trying to, Linda Lee, the great advocate, the great supporter of a free expression, and the conservatives are stifling and prohibiting my free expression. That's her main argument. You can see her there trying to get a dissenter, trying to get a disagreeing person out of the meeting. So to me, that seems like hypocrisy.
프리 스피치라 해놓고 자기네들과 맞지 않는 사람을 내보내는 쫓겨내는 그런 사건이었습니다.
Park Young-jun was appointed as one of the key officials of Pyeongtaung, 민주 Pyeongtaung here in LA.
그 평통에 포인트됐다고 해요.
And his job was education, unification education, 통일 교육.
동일 교육을 위해서 가르쳐야
And
돼.
he would lectures to groups of Korean Americans, members of Pyeongtaung, how to lobby U.S. Congress in support of 평화협정.
평화 협정을 어떻게 해야 되는 그런 거를 했던 사람 중에 한 사람입니다.
So here was an individual appointed under the Moon regime to a responsible position in Pyeongtaung, who was meeting in New York with North Korean spies, and who was supporting a convicted North Korean spy. So that shows you why I call the Moon Jae-in years the nightmare years, the bad dream years.
네, 문재인 대통령 했을 때는 진짜 어두움의 세계라고 자기는 얘기하고 싶습니다.
Well, I've spoken for a long time, and I appreciate your attention, and therefore I'll bring it to a conclusion. Thank you very much again. 감사합니다.